Third quarter GDP set to be released in South Africa today. Economists are expecting a range of growth between 1.9% and some are even a little bit more bearish, saying 0.2%. The previous reading, contraction of 3%. Sasha, are you confident that the South African economy is out of the woods?
Oh, it's going to be touch and go. I think it's at the fringes, as we mentioned off air. There are a few wild cards here. One, of course, being agriculture. You know, we know that manufacturing and retail are still under enormous pressure. So, you know, there'll be no surprises, I guess, from those quarters. But I would hope for a positive read, just so that the newspaper headlines can read tomorrow South Africa out of recession, because you'll be surprised what that does to people from a confidence point of view. Whereas if they read the other way around, if they were thinking about hiring someone and waiting for this number specifically, not that everyone sits on the ticker and waits to see Stats SA released at, I think, 11:30. But I think from a confidence point of view, it's going to be enormous. So I'm hoping for a positive read. I think consensus is somewhere between 0.2 and 0.05. So, you know, hoping for somewhere in that sort of range.
You mentioned agriculture, clearly a wild card, and usually that's what history tells us. Mining, though, we know is under pressure. Retail sector, it'll be interesting to see how the retailer, the consumer fares in the December period. Sasha, what are you expecting? Do you think South Africans are going to feel confident enough to go out there and spend this season?
Yeah, ironically, it might arrive at the right time. I've been saying this for at least a couple of months. You know, consumers maybe manage to pay down debt, although debt levels are still relatively high, and feel a little bit more confident going into the festive season that they're going to have a job when they come back next year, because you know, we've seen nearly 1 million jobs taken out of the workforce, and that has an impact on people who staying behind in the workforce, and that's why they continue to be a lot more conservative with their spend. But inside of that, there's a silver lining, because if the consumer can kind of ride this troubled time, normally come through a better consumer on the other side.
Lots of results out on the South African front. We had Telkom coming out late yesterday. Revenue relatively subdued, in fact flat. Margins obviously taking a bit of a knock. And also the company taking a 2 billion rand impairment charge for its Nigerian multi-links. What did you make of those results?
Yeah, interesting. I think you pretty much summed it up there. And there's management execution risk, I think, when buying this company. And that's why the market affords it a pretty low rating relative to its two other listed peers, Vodacom and MTN. Fixed line business is volume, so overall minutes called is actually lower as well. So I think when you look at this company, you've got to ask yourself, where is the growth? I'm sure you're seeing ADSL subscribers being added, but everyone has a product out there now. I mean, you can browse using your handset, you can browse using your handset at home and plug it into your PC or laptop. So I think Telkom has to become a little bit more inventive here, and unfortunately, with the benefit of hindsight, they're well overpaid for that Nigerian asset. And you know, they're sitting with a pot of cash now, you know, tens of billions of rands, and people are asking themselves, you know, what are they going to do with it? And that's why Telkom has afforded, unfortunately, a much lower rating. And you know, the reaction was quite a heavy sell-off at first. I think the stock was down 3.5%, but managed to recover a little bit in rising markets, but down relative to the rest of the market. I don't know. I just, you know, for me, it's one to avoid.
Well, you mentioned where growth is going to come from for Telkom. We know that it sold Vodacom to Vodafone. Do you think that it should have exposure to the cell phone market? And you're talking about being inventive. What other sector could Telkom perhaps head into to try and make its company a little bit more diverse?
Yeah, it depends how you see the future. I think if you see the next 5 to 10 years as being data-driven, then I think they're in a good space, because, of course, they own a large portion of the infrastructure. The question is, can they execute on that? Can they use their superior infrastructure to be able to get all in on one bill in terms of your home usage? You know, you want to be able to, and they have started that with their obviously their closer plans, and they've seen growth in terms of those plans and ADSL. So I don't think it's kind of the end of the road yet, but I do worry with Telkom specifically as where is the growth over the next, you know, half a decade or so, because it's no secret that the other bigger players are building physical infrastructure to be able to compete head on. And if they can offer consumers a more compelling offering, and let's face it, you know, as a consumer, the brand is a little bit tainted because the service levels leave a lot to be desired. And in fact, at a business level, we decided to can them simply because their service levels were so poor. So it's having a real impact.
Thanksgiving on Thursday for the US. And
don't want to be a turkey now. No.
And on Friday, we've got, of course, what it's called Black Friday. It's a half day of trading for the New York Stock Exchange. We also know that that is when the consumer goes out and really starts spending. Sasha, do you think that the US consumer is in a position to spend?
Yeah, I saw a quick poll that suggests that 1 in 4 Americans, which I think is somewhere around 77, 75 million people, is going to make a purchase on this weekend specifically. So I guess that's every man, woman or child. If you add that up and people who've actually of spending age, you'll probably find it's closer to 1 in 3. So it starts traditionally at the stroke of midnight and everyone floods in the stores. Obviously they've got to keep security pretty tight to prevent people from trampling each other, trying to get their Call of Duty 2 or whatever. But it's an interesting time for retailers, and just early evidence suggests that it might actually surprise estimates. I saw one of your colleagues over on the West Coast in California, Jane Wells, who's one of the CNBC contributors at a retail level. She indicated yesterday perhaps people are going to be a little bit surprised. And seeing, you know, she said even pre this Thanksgiving period, she had done a lot of research over the last 2 weeks and seen stores really full and ahead of people's expectations. So I guess what happens is the opposite to when it's going really well, is people lowball their expectations and suddenly your expectations are beat. So even though it's much lower than last year, the headline reads better than expected. And I think that again has a big impact on confidence levels.